In 2007, the brutal murder of British exchange student Meredith Kercher in Italy made global headlines. But you'd be forgiven if you remembered a different name from that case.
Meredith's American roommate and fellow exchange student Amanda Knox became embroiled in a media frenzy after she was falsely accused of the horrific crime. Welcome to the morning show, Amanda. Great to see you.
Good morning.
The story is, I was going to say incredible, that's one word you could use. At what point did you realise that you wouldn't be going home at that time?
Well, a good 2 years into my imprisonment when I got that guilty verdict for the first time, because my family and I truly believed that this was just a huge misunderstanding and that the truth would win out. So to hear guilty and sentenced to 26 years as a 22-year-old, I really had a reckoning with what my life was. I was not living somebody else's life by mistake, which is what it felt like at the time. This really was my life, and I had to confront the reality of this tragedy head on and try to live day by day with a very sad and unfair existence.
When did you first get a sense that this wasn't just news in Italy or back in your hometown, but you were making global headlines? When did you get a sense of that?
Gosh, I mean, the first inkling was the first time that my mom came to visit me in prison, which was a few days after I was arrested. And she told me that just in that first moment, when I still thought that this, again, was just a huge misunderstanding and I would be released any day now, she said that the media was all over the case and that it was out of control. And I think even for her in that moment, she didn't really even herself know how out of control it was going to become. But from the very beginning, this case was huge. And I, as someone who was locked away in a cell, did not have access to it. But every time I walked into a courtroom and I was yelled at and cameras were pointed at me, it was clear to me that this was bigger and had huge implications beyond just the people who were directly impacted by the crime that was committed by Rudy Guede.
So fast forward 17 years. These days, you and your husband host a podcast. It's called Labyrinths. Tell us about the latest mini-series in Labyrinths. It's called False Confessions. So what can listeners expect from that?
Well, not only have we gathered together a number of the best experts in the world around police interrogations and false confessions, but we've also have really in-depth interviews with people who have been coerced by police, like myself, into making false statements and implicating themselves and others in horrific crimes that they had nothing to do with. So it's really deeply personal. It's a deeply personal investigation for me, but also incredibly well-researched, and it really gets into not just the interrogation techniques, but also the psychology of what is happening inside that closed room of the interrogation room.
And how do you feel when you're hearing these other stories? It must be terribly triggering for you.
Oh my gosh, it is, especially now as a mother. Like, there's one story that we cover, Marty Tankleff, whose parents were murdered when in his own room when he was 17 years old, or not in his own house when he was 17 years old, and he was blamed for this crime, even though it was somebody else who committed it. And he was directly lied to in his interrogation room. They said that his father had regained consciousness in the hospital and told the police that he had committed this crime, and that was so psychologically destabilizing to him that he started to think, oh my God, I must have done it. My father would never lie about me. And as a mother, knowing that a child had, just suddenly lost their parents and then was lied to by authority figures that he was raised to trust in such a brutal and betraying way was deeply emotional for me to talk to him about.
So you've been advocating for legislative change. Has there been any progress? What is it that you're seeking?
Yeah, so my big thing when it comes to false confessions and police interrogations are twofold. One is banning deception. And in the United States, there is some movement on that. There are some states that have banned deception when it comes to juveniles. So if you are under 18 years old, in some states, police are not allowed to lie to you when they're interrogating you. The problem is that, one, not all states agree on this, and two, lies are very effective also at destabilizing the reality around adults as well. It's an incredibly effective tool at manipulating someone. And so I think that it should be banned, just blanket banned. And the reality is police officers don't even need to lie to people in order to solicit information. So it's this false idea that they need to lie to you in order to get information from you. The second part is that I've testified about this in Washington State in an attempt to change the laws around this. The second thing that I think needs to happen is for all police interviews and interrogations to be recorded. So you can't confront the truth of what's happening behind closed doors unless you know what the truth is. And so I think it is absolutely fundamental that all interactions with police officers in this day and age, when we all have smartphones in our pockets, there's no excuse for why they shouldn't be recorded so that we know what is happening in these interactions.
OK. You released a memoir back in 2013, but you've got a new book now called Free. That's coming out next year. What do we need to know about the new book?
Great question. So Waiting to Be Heard was my memoir about going through this process of being tried for a crime that I didn't commit. Free is all about this over a decade-long process of dealing with reclaiming my life, reclaiming my identity, and finally doing what it took for me to really feel free after I have grown up in a world where I am defined by a crime that I had nothing to do with. It really is about my mistakes and misadventures reintegrating back into free society, and also culminates in this story of me developing a relationship with the man who put me in prison, and how that has been a part of my own post-traumatic growth. So it's for me, I feel like my experience is really unique in a lot of ways, but the kinds of hard-won lessons that I have gleaned from processing this experience are really universal. And I feel like anyone who has gone through a hardship can really relate to the kinds of things that I am talking about. So the book is available for pre-order now. If you go to amandaknox.com, you can find all of my work, the podcast, everything, and catch up with me there.
All right, Amanda, fascinating to talk to you this morning. Thank you so much for your time.
Yes, thank you so much. Take care.
You can listen to the podcast Labyrinths, which includes the False Confessions mini-series now.